It's amazing over the past few years how much the Krampus culture has evolved. It's actually really, really cool. Because when the opportunity was presented to me, I had no clue who it was. I didn't know what a Krampus was. So I read into the folklore and found out it was the anti-Santa Claus, and I was on board just with that, I was on board because I've always been a fan of the bad guy. Darth Vader, Skeletor, always rooting for the bad guy. So being the anti-Santa Claus, that was right up my alley.
Yeah. So what kind of things did you look up about him? Because there's a lot of stuff out there when you start looking.
I just wanted to find out the basics, and I didn't really want to research into a lot of what other people have done because I wanted to create my own genre, my own niche with it, and not copy anything that anybody else had done. And I'd seen that no one had used their own real body for it. And, my lifelong dream was to get my own action figure at some point. And I thought this would be a chance to do Krampus using my own body and do a totally different version of it and just use body paint. So I went at it that way. I told the producers, I was like, they showed me kind of what the costume was going to be, which was very minimal, which was like a furry man skirt and some gauntlets. And I would come in with my body dialed in at around 4 or 5% body fat, and then we just use body paint. So it was a chance for me to kind of do like a Marvel superhero character and combine it with an animal.
Yeah.
So they left a lot of creativity to me, which I really loved. Just before I filmed A Christmas Horror Story, I was in Fort Lauderdale for 2 weeks. I lived in Fort Lauderdale for 5 years, so I had like a slew of photographers that were friends of mine that always are up for doing photo shoots with me. And then I came back to Toronto to film. My scenes were shot in minus 22 degree weather. So people are like, it's really cool how they added that breath in there. I go, no, that was actually me, and it was freaking cold. Minus 22 at 3 a.m. because my longest day of shooting, I think I had 2 days at 22 hours and 2 days at 18 hours. So they were really, really long days. Not that I was out in the cold the whole time, but when I was out there, they had a jacket that costumes had sewn in like pockets where you could put those like little heat pockets in, and they were constantly refilling that. So the scene where I'm running through the forest, there would be somebody at the end of the forest with one of those jackets on because I'm running around half naked in minus 22.
Yeah. Could you see fine? You have a little bit of stuff over the eyes. I don't know if you have contact.
No, I could see fine. It was what a lot of people don't know was Krampus's face was layers and layers of pieces of latex. It wasn't like I just put on a mask and here I'm Krampus. It was. The nose was different. My ears were covered up. I couldn't breathe through my nose. A lot of the times I couldn't open my mouth too wide, or I would split one of the latex pieces. So like anytime I did like a roar or like a hiss sort of thing, it would rip at the corners of my mouth. So, that was the first time I wasn't able to breathe through the nose, and the first time my ears being covered up as well. So.
How long of a process is that to put all the layers on?
I had an incredible FX team led by a very talented effects artist, Tracy Loader. There was 3 of them, and it would take, the first couple times they did it, with all 3 working on me, it was 8 hours, and then they ended up getting it down to 7.5 hours.
Knocked a half hour off. Had you worked with them before?
I'd worked with Tracy many times. I worked with her a lot on Lost Girl. She was Bruce's effects artist on Lost Girl. So it's always nice to show up knowing somebody that you've worked with before, and they know how I am and I know how they are, and I know they're going to do everything that they can to make me look good, make my character look good.
Yeah.
And it was my first time having an all-female effects artist team, and they were incredible, all of them.
Did it take time to get used to, not just as Krampus, but whenever you get in the makeup on? Was that something you had to get used to, or were you okay with it right away?
I was okay with it. Like I said, I played the Bioman for 3 seasons, and that was, not as intense as it was with Krampus. But the first season of Defiance, the Bioman took about 4 hours to get ready with the the body paint and the fake traps and then the head prosthetic. So I was used to it. And then Krampus just took it to a whole different level, and I liked it. Like I would go in, like I think it was by the second fitting. Tracy's super cool. She knew I liked to smoke a joint, and sitting in that chair for 8 hours, I was like, come outside with me. And she would let me puff, and then I would go in and I would just kind of go to sleep while they did the makeup.
How about when you see the finished scene, when you see the finished movie, what do you think?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I do too.
Like I said, I was very proud of that movie. It was just the only thing that was disappointing was the distributor didn't really advertise the movie that much, because when I did the Toronto Film Fest, it did really, really well at the Toronto Film Fest. And I remember Cineplex reached out to the distributor and saying, why isn't this in our movie theaters? And then it's becoming like one of those quiet movies that nobody really knew about, that it's becoming a good sense.
I've noticed that over, because I really liked when it came out, but I watch everything. So, but I loved it. But I'm happy to see that over the years, like I think more people talk about it right now than they did when it first came out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because nobody knew about it in the beginning, because there was no hype, there's no real advertisement for it, and a lot of people didn't have much expectations. And then, with all the different, like the anthology angle, the little stories, and then William Shatner was absolutely brilliant in it. He just tied that whole thing together.